Hi everybody, this is Scott Egan with the Grey House Literary Agency, and today I want to really talk about your character development and really adding kind of that three-dimensional quality to your characters. I think for me especially, when I start listening to a proposal that an author might pitch to me at a conference, or I might be reading that early proposal, one of those things that I'm looking for is depth. And I obviously look for depth in terms of plot and the plot development, but one of the big ones that I look at is the depth of the character development. And I think that that's so important, especially if you're writing romance and women's fiction, which is obviously what Grey House represents. We need to really get inside of the characters and understand every aspect of them. I think part of the reason why I often reject so many people due to that lack of character development is for one simple reason. The author knows that character too well. We're too close to that subject. We know all their likes, we know their dislikes. Heck, if I were to ask them what did they have for dinner the last night, they could probably tell you. They know those characters that well. The problem is when we know something too well, we start to assume our readers are getting it too. We start to overlook those. This kind of goes back to something I talk about on my blog frequently about writers becoming so close to their own writing that they were writing with blinders on. So when we talk about adding depth to your characters, one of the first things to understand is we are not adding depth in terms of more story elements, and we aren't adding more complications to their life. What we want to know is getting a more of a three-dimensional picture of who this character really is. I think for most of us, where we start is obviously those physical descriptions. We get those elements, but essentially what's happening is we're getting the physical, we're getting the external side of things, and that's all at the plot level. And we need to get inside of the characters. We really need to understand what drives these characters. One of the best ways to do this is to really take some time to draft out and plot out everything you know about your potential character. This is something we do in theater a lot, is that if we really want to take some time to understand who our character is on the stage, we have to examine a lot of different angles. First of all, we obviously examine the directions that the director has provided us, or the script writer. So we look at the immediate script itself. But then we start to take a look at deeper and deeper levels. We start looking at the dialogue of what the character is saying. And we have to start looking at that for your own novels. When the character says something, we have to understand that that's their external thoughts. But are they saying those thoughts because they're covering something up? Are they saying those thoughts because they're reacting too quickly? A lot of that tells us about the personality of that character. For example, if your character happens to see, they're walking out of a grocery store, and they see somebody maybe paying with, trying to make this up off the top of my head, paying with food stamps, paying with some sort of governmental funding, and they look over in the cart and they see things in there like a bag of potato chips. What's your first thought that character is going to have? Is that character going to react in such a way of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that they're doing that, and maybe make some rash judgments? What are they going to think? And I know that seems like it's a really small point, but that gives us an insight into the character. Is this person even going to say anything to that person? So again, that's going to give you some sort of a clue. The next level that you want to look at is obviously how they react and how they behave in various different situations. We need to see that. Okay? So if you're examining, and you should note that all of this is when we're examining the character in somebody else. You need to be doing this, thinking about this on your own when you're writing these. How is your character really going to react to things such as a phone ringing when they're in the middle of a project, or maybe a boss who comes in and suddenly says, hey, I've got to get this project done, it needs to be done in 2 hours. Are they going to react in a certain way? Again, we want to understand how they're going to act but more importantly, why are they going to act that way? The next level that you want to start providing that depth of character development is what other people say and how they act and how they behave around that person. That too is going to add some depth to your character development. And we get a lot from that. Again, this is what I picked up from my theater work, is that when I'm doing a theater production, I always want to see how are other people on the stage reacting to the way that I act, the way that I behave. One of the last productions that I did, I was Oberon in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And one of the reactions and the way that I would look to see kind of, how powerful he was and how strong of a character he really is how did other people react when I would storm onto the stage, especially at the very beginning when the first confrontation between her and between him and Titania show up. When I walk on that stage, what's the command and what's that presence that I'm going to get? How do other people behave? Do they shrink into the corners or something like that? That's telling me about my own character, and you can kind of see those reactions. So that's where we're gonna add that in that depth of character. Now, where do we do that? First of all, we're going to do this in the dialogue. When your characters are saying things, don't just limit these things to one-word answers. Take the time to add more of the explanations in there. Balance that also off with the use of your dialogue tags. So if somebody says something and you know it's going to be a line, maybe you follow it up with a dialogue tag of, he said this, hoping that Mildred didn't see what was really going on in his head. Just a simple comment like that starts to provide us some idea that he's hiding something there. Now, we don't want to just leave it at that point. We want to extend that argument into the introspection. And the introspection is so important. It's those moments in the story when you let the characters think out loud. Now, obviously, you don't have to have them walking around talking out loud to themselves like a monologue or what we would see on the stage. But we want to get those thoughts running through their heads. We want to hear what their real feelings are. Why are they thinking that? We want to hear them processing in their heads the thoughts, the actions, the comments, the behaviors of everybody else around them and the events in their life. Because once we start putting that material into perspective, what that does for your reader is giving us a broader picture of what we're talking about. Now, here's the thing, is that your three-dimensional characters, those happen to be the protagonists. Those are the main characters. We don't need that much, obviously, for your secondary characters. We can limit the secondary characters to the one-word answers, the he said and she said, and that's about as far as that you need to go. Now, there's a couple different activities that you can do. And I think the first one is just simply sit down and make a huge list. Really think about every aspect of your character. These can be, obviously, their looks. How do they feel about their looks? Always think about that. How do they feel about things like that? Do they like their job? When did they start their job? What does their office look like? You don't have to incorporate this material into your story. It's always there, and it's nice because it is there for you later on if you need to. But if you incorporate that information into your own thought process, you can start to work those details and making sure that we get that better picture of who the characters are. Again, as I started off this video here with, is that in romance and women's fiction especially, we have to build those characters. These stories rely heavily on the connection that the reader makes with that character. And we don't want to keep them distanced from the reader. The reader needs to be drawn in. The more they're drawn into the actual experience, the more they can feel the same emotions that the hero and the heroine are going through. That if it's a women's fiction piece about overcoming the loss of a child, the closer the connection is to that you can build between the reader and that character, the stronger the emotional impact it'll be. So really take the time to explore that and to add that depth and think about that and really try to put that into the stories. Make sure that that really starts to get established, especially in the first 3 chapters. Now, you don't have to give us everything, but really push that first 3 chapters and really make sure that we get a good, solid, complete picture of who these characters are and where they're going to in the story. Make sure that you take a look at the blog. I've got a lot of things on my blog post. You can always find it, linking it off of my website, www.greyhouseagency.com, and that's GREYHAUS. But you can always link it off the blog, and if you certainly have other questions for me about character development, please make sure that you send me a quick note either through the agency or directly on the blog, and I'll certainly try to get back to you on those. I look forward to seeing you soon here on the Educational Videos, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.